welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Fiona and this is the space where I talk about all of my creative endeavors. I figured that I would sit down and film a little bit of a chattier video because if you follow me, you know that I recently finished my unicorn tapestry sweater to wear to Rhinebeck, or New York sheep and wool. I've been posting a lot about the process of this, and in theory, there's gonna be a whole process vlog for this, as well as like a Rhinebeck vlog. So a lot of content coming or has already come out there. I have gotten so many questions about this sweater, about the pattern, about my modifications, that I figured that I would just sit down and record a full-length YouTube video and try to explain all of them right here and now. So I've done all my math for the measurements and the yardage and the number of grams that this took. So that's actually gonna also be the total weight of the garment. I also did an AMA about my unicorn tapestry sweater on my Instagram story. So I will be responding to some of those questions as well as some of the ones that I got on just like any of my random reels or TikToks or whatever that I just feel need to be addressed. So the first thing about this pattern is that this is not an original pattern of mine. This pattern is available on Ravelry. It is called the Unicorn Tapestry Sweater and it's by Merit Noor. So I have knit the entire sweater and I know of one other person on TikTok and Instagram who has knit the sweater, and there are no completed projects on Ravelry. Let me give you the details about the project. So I think the most important thing to note when considering knitting this pattern is that it is not size inclusive. I want to be very clear about that. This pattern only comes in one size, and you should really view it more like you're buying the colorwork chart rather than buying a pattern. I know that that's kind of a hot take in the knitting community, and I know a lot of people believe that when you're buying a pattern and it costs money, it should have like testers and different sizing. But in my opinion, after knitting this pattern, I do think that the amount of time and effort that Merit Noor went through to simply create the colorwork chart for this is worth an amount of money alone. This design is a modified interpretation of the Unicorn Rests in a Garden tapestry that is on display in the Met Cloisters in New York City. So I'm going to be taking her to go see the inspo. And it's incredibly detailed. It requires a huge amount of 3-color work. It requires steeking. Basically, the entire pattern is 3 tubes that you knit up based off of the colorwork charts. So each sleeve is a tube, and the colorwork chart just tells you where to do the increases. So that way the sleeve, you know, is shaped like a sleeve. And then the body is basically just knitting one big tube. You have the pattern here, and then you repeat the colorwork chart on the back. So you knit the colorwork chart twice in the round for 217 rows, and then steek the armholes, which I will get into doing that. Sew the shoulders shut and sew the arms on. I would approach this pattern more as buying the colorwork chart for this unicorn tapestry interpretation rather than a sized pattern. I really hate to say that. Loud plain. If this is something you're interested in, but the lack of size inclusivity and shaping and the amount of detail in it is something that is gonna turn you away, I highly, highly recommend checking out Starcrossed Knits Unicorn Tapestry Cardigan. You can also use that colorwork chart to just put it on a pullover sweater. Like, there are other options out there if all the modifications and math and everything required for this sweater is not something that you're interested in. That said, the pattern on Ravelry that you purchase calls for fingering weight yarn to be knit on 2.25mm needles. So that's pretty tiny. That's a very, very tiny gauge. 34 stitches to 10 centimeters or 4 inches. And it will result in a sweater that is 50 centimeters across the bust, 65 centimeters from shoulder to hem, and then the arm length will be 52 centimeters. And I know 2 things about myself, and one is I knit with a crazy tight gauge, and 2, it gets tighter for color work, which meant 3, knitting 3-color color work for the first time was going to come up with some gauge issues. And my Rhinebeck sweater last year, the wave sweater, came out too small. Like, I wish that I adjusted the gauge. Like, I wish that I paid more attention to the positive ease on the pattern. I don't really find it that wearable. And I really wanted to create a garment that I could pull on over anything. I'm thinking like Helene Moo pulling on a knit sweater over all of my outerwear to go for a hike and take aesthetic pictures in Norway, because don't we all wish we could take pictures like her? So I very intentionally wanted this to be oversized. I cannot tell you how many people commented on my video being like, girl, that's gonna be huge. Girl, are you aware that that's gonna be huge on you? Yes, yes, I was fully aware the whole time. That was the plan. That was why I sized up my yarn to DK to begin with. I was literally going crazy because all the comments were like, girl, why do you want it to be huge on you? Because at the end of the day, this is a big sweater. It is not a huge sweater. I know that it looked really deceiving, especially when it was giving pillowcase and I hadn't done the steek yet and like it wasn't clear where the arms were gonna go, but I knew that it was going to fit and it ended up fitting the way that I wanted. I decided to modify this pattern by knitting it in DK weight yarn. I knit this sweater in Kelborn Woolen's Germantown DK. The gauge for this yarn is 20 to 22 stitches on 10 centimeters or 4 inches using 3.75 to 4.5 millimeter needles. Now, I didn't swatch, and that has been something that I wasn't sure if I wanted to address on this, but because I was sizing up the yarn and I was sizing up the needles, I just kind of figured that it was gonna work out how it was gonna work out. And it worked out great. Like, I have no complaints. But this was also something that came from the fact that I have knit a lot of colorwork before and made a lot of mistakes and learned from them. And 2, knit with Kelborn Woolen's Germantown DK before. So I knew, 1, the way that it knit up, because I made a project that came out a little bit smaller than I wanted. Classic me, making things too small. And 2, I really loved the stitch definition that I saw some of my like internet knitting mutuals projects came out with. As you can tell, it was clearly the right choice. Full disclosure, Kelborn Woolens did gift me the yarn to make this sweater, and I'm very grateful for that because I actually don't know if I would have sat myself down to buy the yarn to make this sweater. And they sent me 5 balls of the blue, which is peacock, white, which is natural, and then gold, which is honey. The honey doesn't look as gold on the website as it came out to be, which I was very thrilled about because it was kind of a risk that I was going with honey. And I'm glad that it came out, that it showed up at my door, and it is so gold. That's the details on the yarn. The finished garment came out to be, I haven't wet blocked it yet, I might not. It does need a wash because this John has gone everywhere with me. She is 54 centimeters pit to pit, 76 centimeters shoulder to hem, and the arm length is 59 centimeters. So if we put those sizes next to each other, the sweater only increased in width by 4 centimeters. So that is like a full 8 centimeters for the full circumference. I was really concerned that by knitting on gauge, I would come up with a garment that, like, given the floats and the tension of colorwork, would be really tight across my chest, because that is what happened with my wave sweater. For something that I was going to put 3 months of work into, I really wanted it to be wearable, and oversized is so much preferable to too small. So that is why I made the decisions that I did. That is why I'm happy with the result that I got. I wanted it to be oversized. So you can stop asking me if I wanted it to be oversized. I did. I'm really pleased with the result. Like, sorry, I can't stop holding it up. I just can't stop staring at it. Perhaps I should have worn it for this video, but at some point I am going to turn it inside out so we can talk about our floats, and then I wouldn't have anything to wear. Basic girl outfit it is. Someday I will update all the projects on my Ravelry, because I do think that the pattern on Ravelry deserves a finished project. These are the details on the yarn. Like I said, Kelborn Woolen sent me 5 skeins of the blue, which is 500 grams or 1,350 yards, 4 skeins of white, and 2 skeins of gold. Actually, originally I only got sent 1, and then I ran out and had to get a little more. Thank you, Daily. Thank you for hooking me up. I was really nervous that I wasn't gonna finish the sweater. The total amount of yarn used was 462 grams of the blue, 370 grams of the white, and 123 grams of the gold, resulting in a total weight of 955 grams of yarn used. Yeah, like, there are ends that I cut and wove in, give or take the general mass of this. This comes out to 2.1 pounds. This was another comment that I got a lot that I was like, shut up! This sweater is not as heavy as it looks. It really isn't. And it's another reason why I chose this yarn, because having used it once before, I knew that it was a very lightweight, breathable wool. It's not very scratchy, and once I wash it, it will be nice and soft. I'm just scared of how much it's gonna stretch. It is not heavy. It is not super hot. I wore it under a coat last night to go out to dinner with my boyfriend, and it was a crisp evening last night. It was kind of chilly. It certainly was warm, but me and my poor circulation, my little fingy sticking out of the cuffs, my hands were cold. This is not an overheat in sweater. It will be a really, really nice layer to insulate everything once I'm out and about in the winter when it's properly cold. But Rhinebeck was like 60 degrees and sunny. There were moments if I was like in the direct sun, just like standing there baking, where this started to feel a little bit hot, but like I could roll the sleeves up. I did pair it with a mini skirt, and that was intentional because I was like, if I wear long pants with this sweater, I am gonna be too hot. So it really was perfect with the mini skirt. I have no complaints. I wish that you could all come over and you could hold this up and be like, wow, that really is not as heavy as it looks like it might be. And try it on and know that it's not as hot as it looks like it might be. I mean, it's really just like a testament to how excellent Kelborn Woolen's Germantown DK is. And I feel like this could come off like I'm being paid to say this. Like I said, the yarn was sponsored, but there was a reason that I chose this yarn to begin with. There's a reason why I'm so pleased with my yarn choice, and I'm just being honest, like I'm the luckiest girl in the world to have gotten to knit this sweater with free yarn, because like it's something that I actually am going to wear with regularity. It's the coolest thing ever that I have this and I can just pull it on and it's a comfortable knit to wear. Yes, it comes down over my butt, but not the worst thing if I'm gonna be wearing it in the winter. She's gonna keep me warm. She's gonna keep me insulated, and I'm just really pleased with the end result. So that was the weight. And now folks have also asked about yardage. So the total yardage that I used, I calculated this by weighing the leftover skeins that I have from this project. So again, like it's not a perfect metric, but knitting is math and math is fun. So I did some proportions and solved for X, and I used 1,247 yards of the blue, 999 yards of the white, and 332 yards of the gold. So that totals to, I feel like it's never useful to get the full total of yardage because you're always like, how much for each color, but 2,578.5 yards of Germantown DK. Oh, my friend asked, how do you feel about your yarn choice now that it's done? Would you do anything differently? No, actually, I feel very happy with this. I think I might have done some of the ladder backs closer together and done 4 stitches between each ladder back and not 7, but we'll get to that when we talk about the floats. Someone asked for yarn management and color work. Wish I could help with that. I got really, really good at knitting two-handed color work, with one hand knitting English and the other continental, and it's been great because now I can kind of knit continental when I'm knitting stockinette. Hopefully I'll get better at that, which means that I will knit even faster, because I knit pretty fast to begin with, but I also knit a lot. So that's why I get my projects done so quickly. So let's get into some of the other questions that I got on my Ask Me Anything on my Instagram story. I had a number of people ask me basically the same question in different words, which was, why this pattern? Why did you choose the colors that you chose? Would you make it in different colors if you made it again? What other patterns were you considering for your Rhinebeck sweater? I feel like I can answer all those questions with just like one long-winded rant, which is what I do best. This sweater is inspired by the Unicorn Rests in a Garden tapestry that is located in the Met Cloisters in New York City. So per the Met info, this was made between the years 1495 and 1505, woven as a tapestry in the South Netherlands, probably by monks in that era. I wish that I had a very visible reason to point to why I love this tapestry so much. It's incredibly ornate. I actually haven't seen it in real life. I do have a trip planned uptown to go wear her and have her meet her inspiration. But I think that's the thing that I love so much about it, is the amount of detail in the original tapestry. I'm a horse girl, so I will love anything that is vaguely horse-shaped, and a unicorn is like a horse but cooler. And I have always really, really loved the medieval art style. I love how intricate the artwork is, and I have always been very fascinated by tapestries. I think that weaving is a craft that I will never do because I simply don't have time for that. I can't believe that I had time for the knitting of this sweater. I think that the knitting of this sweater is the closest that I will ever get to mimicking weaving a tapestry. My parents took us on a lot of trips to Europe when me and my sister were growing up, we always would do like castles and churches and cool art museums. And I've just always been really interested in cool old art. Like, I studied abroad in Ireland and we went to see the illuminated manuscripts in Dublin, and like, I just love the way that they made everything so ornate and detailed and beautiful when like it doesn't have to be. Even, you know, the T in the to start a paragraph is decorated and has little characters around it. I actually have, let me show you real quick. I actually have this picture up on my wall. I got it from a thrift store and I thought it was so cool, and it has a unicorn because it reminded me of the unicorn tapestry. This just has been a piece of artwork that has lived rent-free in my brain since the first time I saw it, and I don't even know when the first time I saw it was. I swear to God, it could have been elementary school, and it's just been something that I have really admired for my whole life. So I chose this pattern because I came across it on Instagram. This was right after Starcross Knits had released her unicorn tapestry cardigan that had gone like mega viral. It is so interesting. I think that so many people, specifically women, really resonate with this art piece. It's beautiful, and it's beautiful in how ornate it is and the time and effort that's been put in to add so much detailing to the background. I heavily considered Starcross Knits pattern, but at the end of the day, it ultimately just wasn't detailed enough for me. I feel like the thing about the tapestry and this project, this pattern in particular, this colorwork chart, the draw was the fact that it is impossibly ornate. I have an emotional relationship with every single stitch on here because this was the opposite of a mindless knit. This was 2.5 months of complete and utter hyper focus. I guess the sleeves I could kind of like zone out on. Geometric colorwork, 2 colors does go quickly. But man, knitting the body of this, I did kind of grow to resent it a little bit because I was like, uh-oh, I can't do anything because I have to sit on the couch and work on my knitting project so that way it will be done in time for Rhinebeck. And you know what? I actually don't regret any of those times that I did that because I literally was like, up until the last second, literally the 11th hour the day before, I was gluing in ends and making sure everything was good to go. I even still have some ends from my steek that popped out, but I'll talk about that when I talk about the construction of it. I chose the colors I chose because I wanted to mimic the colors of the original artwork as closely as possible. Obviously, it is an interpretation still. I didn't really want to do like additional colors. I know Shelly, who also has knit this, they duplicate stitched in like a bunch of different colored flowers. I don't got that dog in me. I don't, unfortunately. I was like, I'm just gonna knit straight to the pattern because I don't have the brain space for that, and I am on a deadline. That is why I chose this pattern. That is why I chose the colors I chose. Would I choose any other colors if I knit this again? Well, I'm never knitting this again. I'm never doing something like this ever again, I say. I'm sure I will do something like this at some point because now I know I can do it, which is terrible because I really do have the audacity to just do stuff like this. This is the hardest thing that I have ever made. It was not fun while I was doing it. I enjoyed the process. I adore the final product. It was not a fun knit, and it was not a knit for the process. I had a couple people ask me because they loved it too, and I'm so glad that you did. I'm so glad that so many people were interested in the thing that I made, and that like it really is so special that so many people resonate with this artwork. But this is not a beginner colorwork pattern. This was barely a Fiona level colorwork pattern because I don't really consider myself that advanced of a knitter. Knitting in many ways, I do feel like you have to just do it. A pattern will tell you what to do, and the wonderful thing about knitting is you can always frog back and redo something that you make an error with. But this is not a beginner colorwork pattern. One, because 3-color colorwork is terrible. It is a terrible time. I would not recommend that anybody does that, but sometimes we have to do hard things to make beautiful things. The ladder backs and the float management was actually what really slowed me down as far as making progress on this. It took me an average of 10 minutes to knit around. There's a little bit over 300 stitches. It's like 150 something across for just the one colorwork chart, and then obviously it repeats on the back. You can see like where the colorwork chart repeats. I have been collecting up some suggested beginner colorwork patterns. I will always say 2 colors, geometric, repeating. That's gonna be your best friend. That's how you're gonna learn how to do color work. And don't be afraid to frog. My first ever color work project, I frogged. completely. I never finished it. I just kind of hated the way that it was working up because there is a lot of practice and there's a lot of trial and error that comes in float management, in making sure that your floats on the wrong side of the knitting are loose enough to still give your project flex and drape, because floats will make or break your colorwork project. I feel like that is our natural segue into getting into floats. I feel like I've said what I need to say about the difficulty of this project, of this pattern. It is not a casual knit, and I think it probably would have gone to my whip graveyard if I wasn't so determined to finish and wear it for Rhinebeck. It challenged me in ways that I wasn't quite expecting. Of course, I then immediately picked up another 3-color colorwork project. It's amazing how much easier it is now that I've conquered the unicorn. So this is the sweater inside out. I think I'll have to do some B-roll. I'm beyond proud of these floats. I think that floats are one of the coolest things of any colorwork project, and I wish that more knitters showed off their floats, because I'm always fascinated in how people hide things on the backside of their project. Really, the coolest thing about floats is they are negative of the knitting on the front side of the project, so I think it's really cool that you can still see the same motif here. As you can see, boy, oh boy, 3-color colorwork is a beast. You can see my ladder backs easier here. I posted a short, I think it's on YouTube, but it's also on Instagram and TikTok, how to do ladder back jacquard. It is my favorite way to do float management. I was doing a ladder back every 7 stitches. It does mean that every 7 stitches, especially if you're like cooking, knitting in stockinette, knitting just in blue, and then you have to stop and wrap your yarn, do the purl, and then wrap it back, and then you can go back to knitting in stockinette. So tough. That's my ladder back jacquard. I have some other ladder backs that are hidden behind some of the other floats because 3-color colorwork was terrible and it was really hard, and I really can't wait to not do that again for as long as possible. My floats are so sick. I love that you can see the unicorn in negative, and then like for some of the gold up here at the top, I did what I have coined lazy girl intarsia, which is just like using a short strand for just like the little bit that you need. There's also some down here. And then I used my new best friend liquid stitch to glue the stitches, the ends in place, so that way they won't come undone. I had no time to be sewing in ends, so that's why liquid stitch became my best friend. Also because I had some issues with the steek. For those of you who don't know, steeking is a technique where you reinforce the stitches, and I do have footage of myself doing this, so I'll put that in. It's a technique that helps you knit colorwork in the round for as long as possible, and then you will then reinforce the stitches, reinforce the knitting, and then cut it, which was the scariest thing I've ever done, cutting into this knitting, because I was like, if this comes unraveled, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a danger to myself. Thankfully it didn't. Thankfully it all worked out. A little bit of liquid stitch did save the day. I used my sewing machine to sew 2 rows onto either side of the stitch that I was going to be cutting, and then I cut it. I sewed the sleeve on. So at the end of the sleeve, she had me knit an extra 3 to 5 centimeters to make the sleeve cap, which is basically this little rolled knit part. So I sewed the sleeve on, and then I folded this over to protect the open edge of the cut stitches, and then I had sleeve, and then I had sweater, because after that I just had to knit the collar. And that was how this came together. I felt like steeking was gonna be something that I was really scared of and I was gonna procrastinate, but thankfully I finished knitting this the day before I had to leave for Rhinebeck, so I steeked literally the morning that I was leaving for Rhinebeck and assembled her, and then I got on the train and I went to my parents' house. I started it on August 5th and I finished it on October 17th. So it took me literally exactly 10 weeks to knit this up. And that was probably about 6 hours a day of knitting at least 6 days a week. You know, there were some days I didn't work on this. There were some days that I took off, and there were some days that I knit more. So I would say that was about the average amount of time that I put into this.
Editing Fiona here, in the time that it took me to post my Rhinebeck content, run the New York City Marathon, procrastinate editing this YouTube video, and then finally get around to doing that. A couple videos of the sweater have breached knitting internet containment and reached normies who don't knit. And I've gotten a lot of questions about commissions, about whether or not someone could pay me to make this sweater. And so I talked a little bit about like how long it took. I knit about 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 10 weeks. Obviously, like, with some outliers like knitting more on the weekends, having really big knitting binges when I was on planes, traveling. That comes out to a total of 360 hours of knitting at an expert artisan wage per hour, which would be about $40 an hour, times 5 for a luxury product markup. Oh, also plus $176 of materials, because while this was a sponsored project, I would be asking you to pay for materials. I'm so sorry. Although $176 is barely a dent in the $72,880 that I think I would be starting pricing a commission for this at. This was a really fun project to knit. It was a really fun project to knit once. I knit for fun. I do not knit for money. I feel like most of the people who'd be watching this would understand that, but putting a financial value to this sweater has been something that's been really interesting, because like all of my knitting projects are usually just like, oh, it's like what I do after work to wind down. And then considering that like that comes out to above the average salary for the price of a sweater, like this just isn't something that's worth money. It's something that we do for the love of the game.
That is all that I had for this video. I hope that you found this informative. It was very much a vibes-based project. Those vibes were very informed by my past knitting experience, because unfortunately, experience and practice is the best thing to get better at anything that you care about. I really wish that I could have woken up and been an expert at everything that I'm interested in, but alas, every day I must wake up and practice my craft, and eventually you do get good enough to make something like this. I hope that this answered all of your questions about the unicorn tapestry sweater. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will link the pattern as well as my affiliate link to Kelborn Woolens if you'd like to check them out in the description. And if you don't already, feel free to follow me on Instagram and TikTok as well. That's where I post short form updates of all of my projects, and like it's a much more interactive community over there, because I really like to do those like ask me anything type boxes. And I guess the last thing is, if you came up and said hi to me at Rhinebeck, oh my god, hi! I felt like a celebrity. I took pictures with so many people, and I had so many people take pictures of my sweater and be like, I love your content. I like was rooting for you to finish. I was so nervous, and I'm so glad to see you here that you finished. I'm so flattered that literally anybody watches any of the content that I make. Like, I feel so cringe sitting here and talking to my camera, especially because my roommate is right over there watching me talk to my camera. It really makes all of this time and work and effort and the drama with my dead microphone that will be revealed when you see my making of this vlog, and also my Rhinebeck vlog. Like, your girl has technical difficulties and other stuff going on in my life. So thank you so much for watching. This has been super fun. Like I said, I hope this answered all your questions, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.